Hello viewers, I'm SB, and this is the digital adaptation of Nemesis Lockdown, the popular board game. It's currently in early access, and they're doing an early adoption deal for just about another day after this video posts. Sorry to cut it so close on the end of the sale there, but I wanted to get some good experience in with it before making the video so that I sounded like I actually know what I'm talking about, and it turns out it's actually really difficult to get 4 adults together for board game time. Who knew? Anyway, like I said, this video game is a digital version of Nemesis Lockdown, which is a pretty recent and apparently quite popular semi-cooperative board game about trying not to die horribly in a secret base on Mars. Players have to avoid getting space murdered by aliens, find a way to survive the catastrophic shutdown of the base, and accomplish their secret objectives, which may put them at odds with each other. And then on top of that, the shadowy corporation that owns the base may just decide to flush part of it into the vacuum as a contingency, to maintain trade secrets or whatever. So you also have to find a way to navigate that. Frankly, it's not a great situation, and it is just one of the many reasons that you should not go to Mars. If someone offers to send you to Mars, they are trying to get you hurt, and they are not your friend. The basic meat of the gameplay involves spending a handful of action cards to take a variety of actions around the base, like moving, scavenging for items, repairing science fiction future technology, or immolating a room full of survivors to deal 1 damage to a single alien in an act of supreme spite. Each character has a different action deck, giving them significantly different strengths and weaknesses. You get a pretty limited number of actions per round, and there's a pretty limited number of rounds in the game, so the time pressure is real, and the situation around the base is constantly deteriorating. After the players have completed their actions for the round, an event phase occurs where things like generator failures, random fires, and alien infections can occur. The situation is dire, and it is just getting more so every moment. And with the randomized objectives, you can't ever really trust that you and the other players are even working toward the same purposes. It's pretty stressful. It's a really stressful game. And honestly, I enjoy the amount of plates that you have to try to keep spinning. There's a lot to focus on, there's a lot pulling your attention in different directions, and it feels like you are sometimes making really meaningful situations to focus on one concern over another. I will say, though, that I think the core design it's more random than I would like. There are a lot of chance elements involved, and while many of them can be managed or mitigated in some way, there's too many random things going on for you to feel like you have much control over many of them at the same time. The unpredictability of that can create tension, can make for some interesting stories, but it can also be pretty frustrating and can lead to some really non-competitive games where it feels like the outcome is barely affected by your decision-making at all. It's not my usual cup of tea, but an awful lot of people really like this game, so your mileage may vary on that. So, how does the PC experience compare to that of the physical board game? I think there are some real upsides to this adaptation, but there are also some things that I'm really hoping they'll correct before the game comes out of early access. I'm not going to try to explain the full rules of the game here in this video, but as is common with board games, you can access the full rules PDF on the manufacturer's website for free. And at this point, you'll probably need to, because the PC client doesn't really do a great job of explaining things. Really, my main frustration with this version of the game is that it often doesn't make clear what is happening or why. Like, the game manages the rules in a totally functional and consistent way, but it doesn't always show you how it's doing that. The event phase just breezes past very quickly, sometimes without even showing you what event card was drawn. The exploration tokens happen completely without any kind of notification at all a lot of the time, and that's frustrating. There is a log that records events pretty well, and you can at least use that to look at after something has occurred to find out what happened, but it sure would be nice if the client would just slow down a little bit and actually display the rules interactions as it's processing them. A fair bit of effort has gone into creating 3D models for all the rooms and the characters, and giving them animations and whatnot, but all that stuff feels pretty premature, given that the game can't always clearly represent the game state yet. In particular, I would really love it if you could play from a more zoomed out view that displays the rooms and corridors around your character's current room a little bit more clearly, because I feel like having to flip back and forth between the main 3D view and the map, it's just kind of a bummer. You're like always zooming in and out, and it's not very smooth. The game also desperately needs a copy editor. There's a lot of weird typos and not quite English in the English version of the game, owing, of course, to the fact that the developers are not primary English speakers. I think the company is based in France, so the French language version of the game might be really clean in this regard. And occasionally the English text is garbled enough to cause actual difficulty understanding what's going on. Again, a decent knowledge of the board game's rules is probably necessary to really follow what's happening at this point, and that is a real bummer. All that said, the game is still in early access. It just entered early access, and the devs have put out a list of early access priorities that does cover most of my complaints. So all of this stuff totally might get fixed, maybe even in the near future. And I don't mean to sound like entirely negative about this either. There is, I think, a lot to like here. For one thing, a digital adaptation of a board game that has like functional multiplayer support will always have the obvious advantage of allowing you to play with friends who are not currently inside your living space. That was the thing that was really valuable even before the everything that we are still in the middle of. There's also the matter of cost here. Nemesis Lockdown's physical edition has a lot of like fancy alien miniatures and stuff, and so it commands a pretty hefty price tag. This is an expensive game, but the digital edition, at the price that it's currently at, even without the sale, is definitely, like, it is much cheaper to just buy copies of the digital edition for everyone in your board game group than it is to buy the physical game itself. So that's certainly a consideration at the moment. There is one more major advantage for me, although I think this one might be a little more controversial, again, because I know a lot of people really like the game as is, but I do not love the physical experience of playing Lockdown. I think a lot of the rules are pretty fiddly, and there's a lot of like weird little exceptions, and this thing does one thing if drawn in one circumstance and a different thing if drawn in a different circumstance, and it's just, you spend a lot of time like flipping tokens and rolling dice and manipulating little objects around your player board, and not nearly enough of your time is spent making decisions and doing the interesting parts of the game. And the digital version has a huge leg up here, because the computer like really smoothly and quickly manages all that, so a much larger percentage of your playtime is spent actually playing. This design just benefits tremendously from having a computer to facilitate like the event phase and component management in general. This is just a really, really good way to play this game. So that's really where I'm at on this thing. I very much enjoy semi-cooperative hidden objective games, and like I said, I like how much is going on in this one and how it pulls your focus in so many different directions. And while I think the digital client, the PC client here, is a little rough right now, it's a pretty good start toward a very convenient way to play Nemesis Lockdown. If they can just make the rules and the mechanisms of the game a little bit more visible in the digital client as they are happening, and maybe clean up some other things like the language, I think this will be clearly the best version of what is a really popular and well-liked board game with a much lower buy-in than the physical edition. You know, there's a lot to recommend that. So that's going to be it for us for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. This thing is really neat, and I hope that this video was useful to some of you in your purchasing decisions. When you come back next time, there's going to be some more new stuff on the channel here, and maybe, fingers crossed, very much hoping to check out some more board game stuff in the near future. And we'll see you then.